Hey folks, welcome to the Buckle Up Podcast, the Millennials Guide to the BRI. I'm your host, Enzo Kong. Now, I don't blame you if football is the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Brazil. And indeed, we're going to mention a little bit about it in the episode. But more importantly, the focus here is the bread and butter of the Brazilians, agriculture. We're going to look at how Brazil's agribusiness has thrived as a consequence of BRICS and the BRI. We also discussed the current state of the Chinese investments in Brazil and the job and education opportunities offered by the BRI to the Brazilian youth. Ana Palazzo is the perfect guest for this episode. She not only has years of experience in strategic planning in the agribusiness industry in the Americas, but is also currently pursuing her master's degree in contemporary China studies in the Renmin University. She gave me great insights into Brazil's strengths and what the country needs right now. If you're interested to find out more, please enjoy the conversation. Hey, hello, Anna. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Hi, thanks for inviting me, Enzo.
How are you doing?
Good to see you. Great. How are you doing?
I'm good too. Brazil and China, they go way back. And so the only problem I had when I was preparing my agenda was where do we even start? So, but if we were to point to a period of time which is more important for the trade relationship, I guess 2009 would be an important time, because that was it was from 2009 onwards, China has become the biggest trading partner of Brazil, and it was also the year when BRICS was established, which is the association of the 5 emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So can you first tell us what is the legacy of BRICS and if it has delivered any substantive impact to the Brazilians?
Sure, great. Well, first of all, if we think about emerging market economies as a whole, more than half of global GDP growth is expected to come from emerging market economies, this by 2020, and over half of the world's population will be in those countries too, which is extremely correlated to the increase of food demand, especially protein, sugar, processed food, and you name it. BRICS, specifically the economic bloc composed by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, it comprises about 30% of the world's GDP, 25% of the world's total land, more than 40% of the global workforce. And China alone was responsible for over 35% of global GDP growth from 2017 to 2019. So it's just to contextualize the importance that we have globally in terms of emerging economies and BRICS as well.
Right.
Considering specific arrangements for BRICS in Brazil, I guess I can mention the announcement of the BRICS Bank in the 2014 summit that was held in Brazil. And the BRICS Bank will officially open in Shanghai in 2015. And also in the 2019 summit that also occurred in Brazil, there was about $8 billion in projects that were announced and structured for the BRICS economic bloc. So those would be like key figures considering BRICS and Brazil. And of course, the tremendous commercial relationship within China and Brazil that we are going to talk about a little bit later.
So since you've mentioned the BRICS Bank or the BRICS Development Bank, so it is actually quite an innovative financing solution because some would see it as an alternative for the World Bank. And apart from the BRICS Development Bank, we have also seen the contingency reserve arrangement, which is seen as an alternative to the IMF. So can you tell us what exactly are those and how are they helping, for example, the agribusiness sector in Brazil?
Great. So in terms of financial policies as a whole, I think everything that it's proposed of being structured is extremely positive. Of course, we gotta abide international rules in terms of risk policies, in terms of governance, and all the legislations that might take place in such an initiative. But considering the NDB, the New Development Bank, or the BRICS Bank, as we want to call it, it's a relatively new multilateral financial structure, relatively still small. If we think that we have a capitalization about $50 billion, and by 2021, I guess about $10 billion required as pay-in capital. If we think about the World Bank, it's an institution, of course, much more mature and with over $200 billion in terms of capitalization. But in terms of initiative, I guess it's a tremendous opportunity, especially if we consider the BRICS economic bloc, which is composed of developing economies, and not only developing economies, huge developing economies, and so different between themselves, isn't it? The contingency reserve arrangement, or CRI, as we want to call it, is also a great tool. And of course, China has the chance, the opportunity to lead both initiatives. In my opinion, the participation of China in the CRA, for example, is 41%. So it's the country who has the most economic capacity and robust capacity to lead both initiatives. China also issued like green bonds in 2016, around that, considering the NDB. It was over 400 million US dollars. It will depend on the average of exchange rate that we are going to consider, but it was a great initiative, especially in terms of sustainability.
And it was issued in the Chinese yuan as well.
It was issued in Chinese yuan. I guess it was 3 billion, the conversion,
right,
in terms of Chinese yuan. So it's pretty positive in my point of view. Considering that my background, which is in the agribusiness industry, I guess, and considering financial policies, which is our subject now, I would like to point another interesting initiative that it was held in Brazil, which is one of the BRICS countries, the economic bloc, which is the barter operation. Just to contextualize the concept, barter is an act of trading goods without the use of any money or monetary mediums, such as credit cards or anyone that you can think about. So basically, considering the agribusiness industry in Brazil, in general terms, barter is used to change agri inputs in exchange for production, for agricultural production, especially if we consider grains. Okay, this is extremely relevant for our country and for the whole world, and especially considering BRICS and the relationship between Brazil and China. Mainly because the grain sector in Brazil, it composes almost half of the country's gross production value. We are talking about over $140 billion, and I'm basing myself here on average of exchange rate of 5.3, which was the average rate for the 2021 crop year in Brazil. We are talking about over 60 million hectares, over 280 million tons produced. So this is just for us to keep in mind the the numbers, the amount of impact of such policy in the country, considering financial tools. This was primarily created and structured, to say the most, because the federal monetary system that we have in the country cannot fulfill 100% of the farmers' need in terms of loans. So the federal subsidized farm loans fulfill about 1/3 of farmers' needs. For the 2021 crop, we are talking almost $5 billion, again, basing on the 5.3 conversion rate. And this is a characteristic of barter. You know, it's generally using in times of high inflation or tight money. So the private sector structured itself to fulfill part of this need. So currently, the federal subsidized farm loans fulfill about 1/3 of the sector necessity. Barter operations fulfill another 1/3. And the private banks, a variety of private banks that we have in the country, fulfill the other 1/3. So in terms of partnership between the private sector and the farmers, this is a very interesting example. Such it is the initiative of the New Development Bank. And I'd like to point that such initiatives are complex. They have a variety of different commercial business model that can be run, but they are extremely positive in all the ways, whether we are talking about domestic market, agribusiness market, which is my background, or a global multilateral institution as it is the BRICS Bank, the New Development Bank.
And I can see that barter is actually very well developed in the agribusiness industry. You have the farm product bond, which helps facilitate the cash forward contract for the production. So it's not as primitive as its name suggests. So,
No.
but despite what we have talked about, the long relationship between the two countries, one quite surprising fact is that Brazil actually has yet to officially sign up for the BRI. Now, we can talk about the reasons later, which might include the lack of knowledge about the plan from the politicians or the private sector, but it would be a mistake to think that nothing has been going on in the ground, because we have been seeing a lot of investments, a lot of projects involving Chinese investments in Brazil. And more importantly, there has been a lot of trade going on. And the most important sector would definitely be the agribusiness sector. So Anna, can you tell us about how important agribusiness is to Brazil and how important China is as a customer to the Brazilian farmers?
Well, pretty great. Yeah, in terms of investments, you're pretty right. We have from the past decade, almost 200 initiatives and almost $7 billion in investments in China and Brazil. So it's pretty huge. But talking about agribusiness, to give you some numbers of the sector in our country, in Brazil, it accounts for over 1/3 of the country gross domestic product, of the country's GDP. About 35% of the formal jobs. This may vary depending on which sectors you are considering, but about 35% of total jobs in Brazil are comprised in the agribusiness industry as a whole.
And when we talk about agribusiness, it's not only about the farming or the agriculture, it's also about the marketing, planning, and all that.
Yeah, pretty good observation. It's a whole value chain. Goes from commercial activities, planning activities, financial activities,
right.
marketing activities, academic activities as well.
Right.
And then you have the actual production of fruits and vegetables, grains, sugarcane, swine, poultry, beef, forestry, you name it. And then you have the after gate that we commonly say here in Brazil, which are also activities of commercialization, activities of international relations. It's a whole world.
That's why it's making so many jobs.
That's why, and 35% I'm considering this whole bunch of potential industries that are involved in the sector. On a global scale, we do have 22% of the world's agricultural land. And with that, we are positioned among top 3 in terms of production and yield of major agricultural crops, as we just mentioned before. So it's a pretty unique case in terms of productivity and sustainability as well. This, I think it's very important to highlight. There is a very interesting study from FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, that lists that by 2050, the world will reach 9 billion people. We currently have almost 7 billion, right, if I may not mistaken. And for us to be able to feed 9 billion people, our food production globally will need to grow by 60%. And Brazil alone will be responsible for 40% of its growth. So we are pretty much the farm of the world, and
you don't have to worry about the demand.
No, we don't have to worry about the demand, and not only the farm of the world, but also a key contributor to guarantee peace in the world. There can be conflicts, I mean, with food, but there can be absolutely no peace without food. So this is certainly a key pillar to guarantee security in our world. And we are pretty able and pretty ready to do that in a sustainable and productive way to the whole value chain. This is the most important, I guess.
And I get that as it stands, China is a big customer for the Brazilian exports. So what kind of produce is China buying?
Oh, great. So China imports about 40% of our total agricultural exports. And 60% of this volume is comprised by soybeans. So the majority is soybeans. Then we come meat as a whole, especially if we consider like beef, poultry, and other products as well. But 60% of the whole imports is soybeans, because it's a key product for the Chinese agricultural production as well. You guys produce a vast amount of poultry, of swine as well. So soybeans is the primary raw material to sustain, to feed your animal production as well. So.
And unfortunately,
and it's interesting just to mention, to say that Brazil is one of the only countries who has a surplus in terms of trade balance with China, when most countries, especially the US, for example,
of course,
have deficits. Right. US deficits, I guess it's over $100 billion per year. One of the reasons who motivated the trade war, right, and all that conflicts that we saw. But Brazil, although we do have some criticism domestically, considering the characteristics of our imports to China, is one of the only countries who has a surplus. And if you think about commercial strategy, we can go in different ways. But from my experience in different roles in the agribusiness industry, considering commercial and marketing roles, I think one of the most positive is to deliver it what your client want. This way, you are going to be able to generate profit and developments to both sides of the value chain. And of course, we can do variations. It's good, you can and you should, but primarily delivery what is the need of your client. I think it's a pretty good strategy.
Mm-hmm. Now, what you've just mentioned is actually precisely what I want to ask is, so during the trade war under the previous US administration, we have seen that the US has been pressuring China to buy more produce from the US farmers, including soybeans. So how has that affected the business or the sales figures for the Brazilian exporters?
Oh, Enzo, I guess, of course, considering trade wars, it's something that I might imagine no one would like to put a trade war. And I don't see any long-term benefit coming from any trade war. If we consider the example of the conflict between Russia and European Union around 2014, for example, this benefited for a period of time the exports of meat, swine, mainly from Brazilian growers. But then we started to suffer sanctions by by Russia because of the extremely amount of Brazilian swine meat that was being put on the Russian domestic market. So I guess the most important thing, if we consider China and Brazil commercial relationship, is how consistent it is, and it's been throughout the years. 10 years ago, for example, China represented less than 30% of Brazilian agricultural exports. Mm-hmm. A decade later, it represents 40%. So yeah, trade wars can happen now and then, but the most important thing is that Brazil as a country, there's no other country who has the capacity to compete in terms of actual potential of production. Of course, China is a great producer. Of course, US is a huge producer as well and competes with Brazil, especially if we consider corn yield comparison, for example, but the consistency of our internal development in terms of agribusiness production and the consistency in terms of the relationship between Brazil and China, I think it speaks for itself.
Absolutely, I totally get your point. So now, still on the agribusiness topic, one thing that actually surprised me is that even despite all the trade that has been going on, the total investments from China in agribusiness only accounts for 3% out of all sectors from 2007 to 2020. So is there an angle here where there could be more room for Chinese investments into Brazil's agribusiness? And when we talk about investments, are we talking about new technologies for the production which would enhance the efficiency, or something else?
It's very interesting to point the growth of Chinese per capita GDP in the past 10 years, which was about annually about 90%. So this again is directly related to the increase in food demand, and especially value-added products, sugar, nuts, meat, processed food, dairy, fruits and vegetables. There is extremely direct path considering income increase and more demand, urbanization, and more demand for value-added food products. This speaks for itself because in 2019, for the first time, China imported more value-added food products, as we just mentioned, then commodities. For the first time, the value-added food products was higher, the volume was higher than the commodity, than the volume of imported commodities. So this is extremely relevant, mainly because China represents 40% of our total exports, but Brazil only represents 15% of China total agribusiness imports. So there is a whole world for us to explore in terms of opportunities. I'd like to mention two. The first one would be in exchange knowledge of operational models for agricultural, agro-industrial, animal protein operation. If we see the Brazil as a whole, besides being a huge country, it has completely different characteristics. The production in the south is different from the one in southeast, which is different from the one in Midwest, from northeast, from north, and you name it. And in all of them, we are positioned with great competitiveness. So this would be a very a huge opportunity of exchanging knowledge, considering our capacity of our adaptability and our resilience in terms of operating such models, to bring this reality to the Chinese reality, to the Chinese business model. That's what I'm saying. There's a center which was launched in 2018, if I'm not wrong, which is China-Brazil Agricultural Innovation, which is mainly currently focused on tropical agriculture, which is the majority that we have here in Brazil, but would be a great opportunity of adapting this innovation center to the bringing Brazilian knowledge to and exchanging with the Chinese knowledge, for example, in terms of infrastructure, which is absolutely amazing. So it would be a great way. Of course, this might be the investments in operations models might be conditioned to a variety of factors. One of them that could be listed is the ownership structure of agricultural land, which currently the policy which currently take places in China, and I guess it's being under review. This would be a key factor to boost investments, but I see as a huge window of opportunity. The second one would be in renewable fuels technology exchange. Brazilian energy matrix is almost half composed by renewable sources, and the sugarcane bioenergy, which is agribusiness, which is my background, represents almost 20% of this total. So it's a tremendous deal in a concept which is so present in Chinese discussions, in Chinese public policies discussions. Renewable energy, and especially renewable fuels, renewable energy as a whole has the capacity not only to bring a more sustainable path, but doing that in a positive economic way as well, generating jobs, generating technology, clean technology. So this would be another key pillar of exchange between China and Brazil, besides everything that we talked about, besides commodities, besides soybeans and this huge commercial partnership. I see these other two points as huge windows of opportunity.
If there is one group of people that is not seeing such a rosy picture, it might be the manufacturers in Brazil. So some people have mentioned that it is because of the cheap Chinese manufactured imports that the Brazilian industrial sector has been declining. Do you think that's a fair assessment of what's happening?
No, I totally don't. Again, in considering this matter, I think that what the problem is not China, is not USA, is not whatever country you want to mention. The problem is the changes that we got to do inside Brazil. And here I'm talking of continue the path of controlling public expenditures, mainly reducing the public indebtedness ratio versus GDP, which if we considering the decade from mainly 2010 until 2017, it got a path of growth that it was like unpredictable, totally uncontrolled, and this is not sustainable to any country. So that's the first thing, that Brazil needs to continue its path that's been structured in the past 3 years or so of controlling this debt ratio versus GDP. The second one is the reforms that need to be run inside the country, especially talking about administrative and tax reforms. And of course, there's a lot of discussions, a lot of point of views. We gotta do it, listen to the whole parts of the society, but we gotta do it. Otherwise, we will never be able to control this public expenditures, simplify the country's tax structure, which is extremely important to boost entrepreneurship, reducing cost of production, generating more jobs. This is the second point. So definitely China is not the problem. We got to solve our domestic problems first in order to be competitive. If we do this, China, US, no other country will be our problem. We can be partners, we can have strengths and open commercial path that we can be more competitive than other countries. And the third pillar, in order to boost our environment, is infrastructure as a whole, which is extremely important, which China, as we mentioned, has a tremendous background. And I see a extremely evolving in this front as well. Just to mention some data, the official federal government plan is to have railways representing 40% of the transportation metrics system in Brazil by 2030. Currently, roads represent over 50%, which is a way of transportation which is not the more sustainable one. It's
considering how big
expensive.
Brazil is.
Exactly, considering how big Brazil is crazy. So infrastructure as a third pillar, it's I'm talking about a three pillars that are equally important in my point of view: reforms, control of public expenditures, investments in infrastructure, mainly in partnership with the private sector. So no, China is not the problem. We gotta solve these issues first, and then we can worry about what the whole world is doing.
Right. Well, I guess another issue that it's facing Brazil right now is the toll COVID has taken on economy. So I guess a lot of us are concerned. And can you tell us about how the country is doing in terms of vaccination and if the economy is bouncing back from the lockdowns?
Yeah, great question. I mean, COVID was a global crisis that a tremendous problem. I guess made all of us very sad, to say the least. So many life lost. Yeah, it's very, very difficult situation. But aside of the inflation that the whole world is currently facing, and it's a phenomenon that it's expected after a global crisis like that, mainly because the need of implementation of liquidity policies by federal governments all over the world, shortage of oil and high demand for food and raw materials. So this is a global scenario. But another key point to highlight domestically, we've already passed the USA in terms of total vaccinated population with the first shot, which in terms of public health policy is extremely relevant. In terms of GDP,
and I know a lot of shots are coming from China. Yeah.
A lot of shots are coming from China. Again, great partnership. And in terms of GDP, in 2020, we dropped 4%. But if we compare to the Latin region, which dropped on average 8%, it's less bad. Let's point like this. And by 2021, we are expected to grow by 5%. So it's a recovery, a positive recovery. In the first semester of 2021, we've created almost 2 million formal jobs, which is also a very positive path. Of course, we do still have a high unemployment rate, mainly generated by our domestic crisis that reached its top on 2014 to 2016. But we've been like generating jobs again, which is great to try to recover this scenario, which is still challenging. Yeah, we have a path of strength and recovery, I can say. I mean, we always can see the glass half empty or half full. I guess we have already too many people here domestically seeing the glass half empty. I tend to see the glass half full and to
at least the worst is behind us.
Yeah, to see the challenges as opportunities of development and learning the lessons that need to be learned.
And you mentioned unemployment, and I guess that's a particularly big problem for the young people in Brazil, not only during COVID, but maybe a few years before that. So apart from unemployment, what are the major issues facing Brazilian youth nowadays? And do you think the BRI can be a solution to some of them?
Great question. I think Brazil, it's an emerging market economy. So as one, we have characteristics of emerging, developing economies, high income inequality, problems in terms of a need of investments in public policies as a whole, such as education, for example. We still need to develop a lot on that. So those are all problems that impact our population as a whole, and especially the youth, of course. But apart from this scenario, again, seeing the glass half full, I see a great deal of evolution as we listed in terms of generation of jobs, in terms of GDP growth, in terms of vaccination rate, in terms of the pattern of partnerships between public and private sector, which is important even primarily to generate those jobs. And this, of course, impacts the youth. So I also see a great deal of appetite by the Congress of implementing the necessary reforms based on technical decisions. And this is also important to benefit our population and the generations that are developing themselves. I totally see that this is not a fast path. It's not, and it's not going to be. But giving the steps and having the agenda set is the first step. If we don't have that, we don't have anything. And this is the numbers shows that the scenario is better now than it was before. So I guess a part of all the challenges, this is a positive message, especially to the youth. considering the Belt and Road Initiative, I mean, it's a fund that some sources say that can be of over 8 trillion US dollars. So, of course, currently is primarily concentrated in Asia or Eurasia, as you want to call it. But as we mentioned before, we've accounted for almost 200 initiatives from China in Brazil, whether they were included in the Belt and Road Initiative formally or not. So in terms of generating jobs, also in terms of education,
Right.
China plays a very important role. I can speak for myself.
Of course.
I was admitted as a scholar to a great master program, which will give me a complete sense of the Chinese environment. I mean, in terms of economy, in terms of politics, in terms of legislation, in terms of culture as a whole, including business culture. So the Master of Contemporary Chinese Studies that I'm currently attending at Renmin University in Silk Road School, it's a unique opportunity.
And
The
may I ask,
disciplines.
how did you come across this opportunity?
Oh, great question. I had a great mentor. Her name is Larissa Vacos, and she was a special advisor for Teresa Cristina, which is the Ministry of Agriculture in Brazil. And she introduced me to this opportunity, and then it was a long process in terms of selection process, and I got it. So I'm pretty happy with everything that I'm learning, the window that's opening. So in terms of China-Brazil relations and the youth, this is also a very rich opportunity as well. So again, let's see the glass half full, because it is definitely half full when it's growing.
And we've also seen some announcements of educational exchanges between the twin cities of Reserve and Guangzhou by the officials recently. So that's certainly some good developments. And I know you're not a big fan of football, but we've seen some cooperations between the Brazilian football clubs and the Chinese football clubs, which will send the Chinese teenagers to train in Brazil. And I think that's just a wonderful opportunity for them. And so towards the end of our episode, do you have any general recommendations or predictions on how the BRI is going to develop?
I wouldn't be able to make any projection, but of course, if we analyze the potential ahead of both countries, it's tremendous. So as we've been implemented so much and so many initiatives throughout the years, I might assume that this path is going to continue evolving. I mean, we just listed, for example, the huge window of opportunities from this year and 2022, considering infrastructure projects, which is one of the core of China. So I might imagine the relationship between both countries will continue to evolve greatly.
And will you encourage more Brazilian young people to learn about China or visit China?
Of course. I mean, it's a unique environment. I just started class like two weeks ago, and the amount of knowledge that I've acquired in these 2 weeks, it's like priceless. It's priceless. I have my major in agriculture, and my background is mostly related to strategic planning in the agribusiness industry. I've passed it to different roles in my career: commercial, market intelligence, operations, advisory. and the knowledge about not only China or Asia, but about the world that I'm being to acquire in this master, again, is priceless. I see a great deal of evolution for myself, and I hope to contribute to this relationship between Brazil and China in the future.
Well, thanks again for coming today, Anna, and it's a pleasure talking to you. Take care.
Oh, thank you so much, Enzo, for inviting me, and I hope we can see each other in Hong Kong or Suzhou soon.
Certainly. Goodbye.